Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to game number one, our best of three series between King Morgan and Philothanic. Blues is going to be joining me for some additional commentary this time around, especially because we don't know if the stream's going to stay online or not. So thanks to Blues for joining us. What are you spotting about this map?
Well, it is a glass colony with pretty awkward silicon. It is workable. The bigger thing is really the water. Just the one high. Really going to be looking at this spot in the southwest.
Yeah, the high water does seem to be point of contention for these players moving forward. There is a little bit of carbon nearby, but the iron is certainly a bit better, and double geotherms available. Philothanic's going to end up dropping robotic on top of that. Meanwhile, Morgan will attempt the eastern play. Interestingly enough, I don't know if he's spotted the high iron that he has available. He's choosing to take a medium instead. A bit unfortunate for him to just miss out on that a little bit to the east of his base. Regardless, both players are going to secure their base resources, but as you said earlier, that high... Oh, there we go. Morgan has swapped. That high water could be the point of contention this game. No core samples available this time round to try and hunt for new resources.
And there are nukes.
Yes. Which could make the water a little bit more difficult to handle. Thankfully for Morgan, even if his water gets nuked out, it should be adjacent to his base. He should be able to expand into additional water if necessary. But once again, that water is likely going to stay quite weak throughout this game once he does secure it. Upgrade about even for both our players. Philothanic seems a little bit late to push into that one, having not sold out of his silicon, and having too much aluminum saved up as well. Just small error, but only 40 necessary for that robotic upgrade. Philothanic had the full 80 stored up and was waiting on steel to come on in. Well, plenty of aluminum next to his base for Morgan as well. It's going to be low tiles, but
the black market is
plenty of aluminum for now. Okay to commit additional claims like this early, as long as you're going to be able to rotate them later, and that's exactly what Morgan seems to be relying on. Very concerned about his source of iron, though. Chooses to actually defend that with the first Goon Squad purchase this game.
And I'm not sure that was exactly the right play. There was an interesting play to be made with a nuke onto Philothanic's aluminum. Just that one medium sitting way out there.
Certainly could have been a nice move, even with the slightly cheaper aluminum costs for the robotic player. You can cause some problems with a nuke like that. Instead, an EMP is going to land onto Morgan's steel, some of it, but he does have a split going on with 4 steel mills. Seems a bit questionable with steel at $20 right now, even with iron down at 4. But he does have functional steel online, going to allow him to push for that upgrade before too terribly long, and not a lot else profitable on this map right now.
It is interesting to me that neither player grabbed the high water right away. Just opting to go for a lot of steel, maybe not predicting that it'd crash out quite so much, quite so quickly.
Yeah, I'm especially wondering about Philothanic's decision in that regard. He had access to a very easy high iron. He had 2 steel mills down. Would have been pretty straightforward to go ahead and drop for that high water and then push into something like farms or reactors if necessary to use the water, but he is going to be okay. Manages to get up to HQ level 3 without too much difficulty. Cheap electronics definitely going to be helping him out there.
Also going for this geotherm adjacent to his iron steel instead of trying for that double geo.
Yeah, another bit of a strange decision. There could have been the option of putting the steel up closer, his other steel mills, up closer to the double geo if you wanted to be concerned about the adjacency. And I do wonder if it's more valuable to have just this one geothermal event and not pick up those adjacencies, because even though you're a little bit more resistant to something like a slowdown strike, if you spread your power out, you are going to need more than just one geotherm to power yourself through this game.
Right, and there is also the thing that if you do get slowdown striked, well, you can just throw a boost down and negate that right away.
That's very true. Well, and boost also just as good if you're not slowdown striked, if you really are concerned about power and want to crash it out after putting your opponent in a significant amount of debt. Lots of good reasons to maybe have considered the adjacency this game. Water pumps do come down from Morgan. Water nice and expensive for him, so that should be a bit profitable, but he is going to need to start being concerned about power up at 213 right now, still with all these steel mills active. Might want to see a rotation out of some of those if we're not going to commit to power very soon at all.
does have the option of putting down a geotherm right away if he chooses to, but he hasn't so far. Wonder what he's saving this last claim for.
Yeah, could round out a triangle pretty easily. If he wished, a geotherm would make quite a bit of sense as well with power this expensive. The electrolysis reactors aren't going to save him any amount of power cost whatsoever. Not a lot of shipping going on, though. Fuel should still be profitable, and the geotherm does go ahead and drop.
Maybe trying to secure a source of income to buy a goon for this geo before putting it up.
Yeah.
5k, bit difficult for him right now.
And that's one thing I was going to mention is black market just going to be difficult for both players right now. Philothanic is actually going ahead and committing into his second geotherm. It is going to be in one of the potentially adjacent geotherm locations, but not actually going to come down there. Morgan goes ahead and deletes the high water from the map. Low water for everybody at this point, but this means that he can't attack either of these geotherms anytime soon.
Right, and I'm also just not sure I like the idea for Philothanic to go into 2 geotherms. It does open up a target for Morgan to attack. Could have just boosted this first one.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment for sure. If you're going to go for just this individual geotherm in particular, I don't like the idea of throwing down the second one with boosts available. Just so much harder. You have to defend both of them. Morgan not going to be taking the opportunity to get aggressive, it seems, but the option was there. Philothanic, meanwhile, he is going to hit with the dynamite onto Morgan's geotherm. Reactors are already gone for Morgan. He's doing a lot of swapping around on HQ3, but at the end of the day, he seems to be in an okay spot, doing a little better on debt, has a little more cash, but does have to be concerned about repairing this geotherm. Why is everybody letting hacker array auctions go today? Just nobody wanted it. Everybody's so concerned about debt. Not even going to bid a little bit.
I have done a lot of poor auction decisions today, so...
Well, it happens. It happens to the best of us, as it turns out. Geotherm's coming back from Morgan. He did choose to get the Goon Squad down this time. Kind of curious if Morgan, or if Philothanic is going to attempt to do the same for his geotherms. Luckily, or if he's going to choose to do an adrenaline boost or something like that instead.
Right, luckily for Morgan doing all these moves, steel and aluminum have stayed very cheap. He does have to be worried about glass just continually creeping up with these warehouses at the colony and no way to really produce it.
The black market is on.
Yeah, and Morgan still has just a single tile sitting around doing absolutely nothing, no buildings on it whatsoever. Not doing so well in power as he never took the opportunity to attack Philothanic, and now the adrenaline boost has come through. That's potentially going to be some cash for Philothanic as he's paying down 1,000 debt a second. And power still holding fairly steady, not dropping too rapidly on him just yet. Also managed to push all the way to HQ4. Things really not looking good for Morgan now.
Starting to go into that silicon, opening up that glass market nicely. And just a lot of money right away.
Yeah, should be a very nice market to be in. I'm very concerned about the fact that Morgan went ahead and purchased a Goon Squad for his own solar panel. He could have also chosen to boost his geothermal plant as well. Go ahead and try and get the power while he can, instead protecting a fairly weak tile and then getting a solar panel next to it as well. That's going to be so expensive, just even more money in Philothanic's pockets as he starts to pull this silicon in.
Right,
Philothanic should commit to some additional claims though.
Yeah. At this point, Morgan's already going to be really struggling for that HQ4 upgrade, so pouring all that money into power when it's well on its way down, not going to work out well for him.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about that for him indeed. I mean, glass, as you keep mentioning, keeps getting higher and higher and higher. Thankfully for Morgan, no additional warehouses have come down yet this game. We're still on just the starting 3, but man, almost 200 per for glass. It's going to cost him 12,000 as things currently stand. And that's just also ignoring the steel and aluminum cost that he needs to be worried about as he just keeps transitioning all of his tiles rather than gaining new ones. Another nuke comes down. Well, all right. No silicon for anybody, it would seem.
Philothanic was sitting on that second claim, does manage to grab a second silicon tile, but I was wondering why it was taking so long for the second tile to come down. He was going to be running a deficit with this 2 glass.
Yeah, and a deficit on silicon, not really acceptable if you're going to get those double glass kilns down right now. as it just means the glass kilns are going to become unprofitable so rapidly, likely wouldn't have even been good to put them down in the first place. So Philothanic might need to shut them down for a moment, do something to be pulling in this silicon. Now, finally running a surplus that he's kind of got them off, kind of on. Game can't decide. Well, Philothanic's still looking to be in a great position. He is easily making quite a bit of cash now. Silicon and glass, both extremely valuable. Doesn't really matter which one he sells down, it's still going to be a profit. Meanwhile, King Morgan, relying on those farms, still has not yet managed to push up to HQ level 4. And Philothanic starting to be in a range of 5 very easily.
Right, choosing to buy the Goon Squad for Silicon instead of upgrading to 5. Just protecting against that second nuke.
Reasonable decision. Don't want to have to commit even more claims that direction if you don't have to.
Especially
at that point, you start to look at a teleport pickup just to make sure you can use them if you face any more nukes.
Right, especially since he has these 2 geotherms established, that's not even going to be an option to move power there later.
Yeah, not going to be a good option for him at all. Decent pirates come down. I mean, each of those hits is pulling in $1,400. I mean, pirates will pay for themselves already at this point. And from here on, it's pure profit for Morgan, something he desperately needs in order to push forward this game. In fact, getting all that silicon has easily let him finish buying up the glass that he requires.
The black market is open for business.
Making him more money than any of his buildings by far.
Yeah, which is just a little bit sad. Morgan did have the ability to potentially push into silicon if he had wanted to, but just needed to actually get to 4. I'm really concerned. I think that the Goon Squad on the solar panel for Morgan in particular, and then making such an effort to put into the second solar panel, those two things combined just slowed him down far too much to be acceptable. Philothanic now has a massive lead in cash. Oh, a mule though. We're actually going to see a mule. Oh boy.
I still have no idea how to value mules.
Yeah, I really don't either. I don't even remember if they're a little less expensive than they used to be now. I'm a little surprised Morgan let that go as cheaply as he did. 8,000 debt for that mule seems pretty decent. Not even really costing Philothanic much, as he can't make money in power effectively right now anyway. The mule's not come down yet, but there's silicon. I don't know if mules get much more valuable than this, I'll be honest. Silicon at 150, rising rapidly as these glass kilns are still online. Meanwhile, water's up at 94 for Morgan. He's going to have to move out of his farms and into some water because Philothanic's bought a lot of that up. I mean, problems everywhere for Morgan.
Unfortunately, Morgan does not seem to have spotted that food to water transition.
Yeah, it is available to him. He may have just forgotten that he's got resources under those farms, in particular water. He's been focused a little bit more on the aluminum. Always nice to keep in mind what you do actually have available under your secondary buildings, just in case it becomes important later. Philothanic's still sitting on $60,000 right now. So far ahead, I just want to see him go ahead and use up the rest of his claims. You know, grab a little carbon, maybe shift into electronics, maybe throw up a hacker array to see if you can end the game. It does look like it's going to be a pleasure dome for the time being, though.
Make decent money with that one expansive on the board, but he is also committing this 14k Goon Squad to it. Maybe 16k, I'm not sure. Probably 14k.
Well, the Goon Squad actually goes down on the patent lab that's currently being built. Feels a little... Patent lab can certainly still get something done, but I do wonder if it's necessary at this point. Your opponent has been struggling this entire time. It's an expansive player. Do you really want to be committing to these fancy plays of, I want to grab some patents, and I'm going to get Pleasure Dome down, maybe snag virtual reality for myself? Or is it a better option to just try and kill them outright? Because now Morgan's up at 5, and that expansive player, that is a lot of claims he's got.
Right, instead of committing that maybe 20k into that patent lab before even starting patents, just like boost out the silicon, make a lot of quick money. He's already around 60% of the way there. I think he could have made it.
Yeah, I do agree, and I love to see players who just go ahead and finish the game off when they're in range of doing so, but that's not how it's going to be this time. EMP gets caught.
Philothanic trying to do Morgan a favor there. These glass kilns are losing quite a bit of money.
Yes, they are indeed. That's a rather interesting way for all of this to go down. Oh boy. I don't even know what to say about that, quite frankly. Well, the game has now decided that, oh no, Morgan sold something. Game was going to stop chewing through his money because he ran out of it, but no. He had to sell something down, try and buy up silicon to keep these active, I suppose.
Also worth noting, Philothanic still hasn't started patent yet. It's still sitting on 2 claims. Just a lot of indecision here.
Yeah, really we're getting to the point where you don't need to make the best move, just make any move, and it's EMP coming down. Philothanic looks like he isn't going anywhere anytime soon, but should have an opportunity to go ahead and think about what he wants to do with this patent lab, if anything.
Not going to have enough money to finish this buy, though he will put a lot of pressure on Morgan.
The black market is online.
Yes, he certainly will. Morgan still doing a great job of tanking his own economy with these glass kilns. And adrenaline boost. Very unfortunate for him now that Goon Squad has cost him more money than I ever would have expected a Goon Squad to do. Don't know if I've ever seen that before. Oh boy. Just a little bit sad for Morgan all around. But he is working on an optimization center now. I imagine looking at potentially some silicon, maybe oxygen and electronics upgrades on that. We'll have to see if he can pull it off, because now both players are creating a bit of a chemical economy if Philothanic ever gets his patent lab going.
And our colony's starting out with fewer warehouses, expanding into a bunch of machine shops. That should work very nicely for Morgan.
It should, if he can survive long enough to use it. He's got a fair amount of cash on hand. Some of it's going to be wrapped up in this optimization center, though. Lost just about 15k when that finished up, I would imagine. And he's going to need to be pulling in this money from these silicon quarries very quickly. Instead is putting down solar panels. Very worried that Morgan's going to let himself just randomly die to Philothanic's very slow, glacial purchase.
Right, at this point Philothanic has enough. He just needs to sell that one stock.
That's true. If he sold that stock down, he would have enough and Morgan wouldn't be able to finish this off. We'll just see if these players spot it. Morgan clearly hasn't. Philothanic doesn't seem to have either. And Morgan's just leaking money as these solar panels finish up. Big problem for him. Another hacker array, guys. Who wants it? Anybody?
Auction unclaimed. Bidding closed.
Nope. Nobody wants it. Okay, well,
The glass
I have
kilns
no idea what's going to happen.
have finally turned off.
That's good. Glass is under $50, and the kilns aren't going to be doing a great job. There is the opportunity to pretty easily move into farms here for Morgan if he'd like to. Philothanic on the verge of cleaning this game up, either by going ahead, selling some stock, or just making about $6,000 more.
At this point, it's pretty much just the pleasure and the food, I guess, now that's coming online.
The black market is
Well,
online.
Philothanic's
There we go.
got the cash. Is going to go ahead and clean up game number 1 here. That was interesting.
That is a word for it.
It was an interesting game. Not necessarily in all of the ways that we hope for a game to be interesting, but interesting indeed it was. I especially enjoyed the EMP that got bounced off the Goon Squad. That was my favorite part by far, personally. That was absolutely wonderful. Oh boy. I don't want to look at the rest of this, I'll be honest. Realistically though, I think it all did come back to that moment when Morgan was just spending too much cash in the black market, too much cash getting power online. There was the opportunity. I think if we had instead seen an adrenaline boost purchase from Morgan, have that hit the geotherm, you've saved yourself a lot of cash by not gooning the solar panel. You just ignore the fact that you've got a single solar panel down. You've already made that mistake. You can't fix it at this point. And then save up that money for HQ4. I think we would have seen a very different game because Morgan did get to 5. He was starting to pull himself back into it, but couldn't quite defend himself from the majority purchase.
Right, just that little stagnation at HQ3 and then all the money lost in glass. Without those, I think we have a very close game.
Absolutely. But unfortunately, that's not the way it goes down, and we head into game number 2 with 1-0 in Philothanic's favor.
Alright, well, I guess we're in game number 2 here.
No.
Have you not loaded in yet?
Yeah. I am here now, just barely. This is why that's okay. In any case, we are here. Philothanic did take game number 1. Welcome to game number 2. Morgan v. Philothanic. Try and rapidly go through this before our players actually get founded. First thing I immediately noticed, by the way, is the expensive electronics and electronics at the colony. I'm still Zoltar. Blues is still here with me doing commentary. Maybe I've bought enough time for him to have a glance at the map, see if he can figure out what's going on, because I certainly haven't yet.
I only see a lot of carbon. I don't know what to make of that. All the water is stuck in the north. Maybe you just work with a scavenger over in this northwest corner. Maybe you work with a robot with this weak iron.
Yeah, I can definitely see both of those as options. Morgan is going to choose the northwest corner, as you suggested, for the scavenger. Philothanic, meanwhile, goes for the southeast. He's a little further away from water than I'd have liked, but he does have
Core
a couple
samples.
of lows adjacent to his base, and core samples, of course, are available. Interesting choice on the aluminum, choosing... Shouldn't make too much of a difference. They're about equidistant from each other, but there is a little better adjacency if that ever happened to come up with a medium later on.
There are nukes available, so it might have actually been relevant.
Yeah, might have been relevant at some point. Both players do have a high aluminum, though. Morgan's can actually pretty easily transition into power later in the game, if he would like for it to. I am a bit concerned about the fact that Philothanic... I'm having flashbacks all of a sudden. Philothanic struggling to get the aluminum bought up to get to HQ2 as his shipment was so far away. But he does get there. He does manage to get there. Just an interesting detail from your game earlier. The whole one player managing to get to 2, the other player getting stuck on aluminum. Never a good situation to be in, but we're not going to see that this game. Instead, both players at 2, and Morgan has already made a move into a food market, which should be fairly profitable for the moment. 40 apiece, not too bad, and already has the water to sustain it. Oh, nuke's already starting to come down. Morgan did attack Philothanic's aluminum.
That is going to make things really difficult for Philothanic. Moving into these electronics, he's going to be operating on 0.5 aluminum per second.
Yeah, that's a very, very small amount. Now, the electronics are themselves reasonably profitable, but he's going to need to upgrade pretty quickly off of them so he can potentially secure some additional aluminum if he wants to stay in these electronics and maybe even get into the silicon to his south. That would allow him to sustain this production for an extended period of time. Morgan, being punished for his medium carbon found, is going to get nuked down to trace. Not a good situation for him to be in either.
Morgan does at least have the 260 carbon already. He'll be able to upgrade to 3 without too many problems, expand into a bunch more lows.
And does also have the option of attempting to find a better carbon tile with core samples if he thinks it's necessary. Really big advantage to your carbon being next to your base is also that he can transition out of any of it that gets nuked quite easily as well.
And even one more option that Philothanic has gone ahead for, the dry ice.
That is available too. Morgan, not quite as strong access to dry ice. It's not immediately under his carbon, right next to his base everywhere, but he can get it down to the south of his farm, so it's going to be all right. Glass kilns coming down for Morgan. It's a bit interesting. Choosing to forego power for now changes his mind. We'll get it figured out at some point.
Electronics. Meanwhile, Philothanic going into a line of powered, middle defended.
Yep, pretty simple power there. Ooh, Morgan probably not too happy to see this particular auction. He's going to feel the need to fight this just a little bit, because he did commit that nuke earlier this game, wants to keep Philothanic from having good access to aluminum, especially considering the importance of electronics. Picks it up for 10k.
Seems Philothanic is very concentrated on trying to make this power money very low debt. Even though this aluminum would have been very helpful, maybe he's trying to see if this is enough of an advantage to forgo that.
Yeah, it might work out for him. 3 wind turbines is not a small amount of power. These are all very strong tiles. EMPs are available. I do wonder exactly how it's going to go, though. Looks like it should work out just fine for the time being. Power not all that expensive, and it is dropping pretty quickly. We'll have to see how much he manages to make before the market becomes non-viable. Right, well, Morgan does have a lot of the glass bought up that he needs to upgrade, but he's just not quite there yet. Struggling for the carbon, going to need a lot of that, and Philothanic does have a small cash lead at this point. I think black market hits might become very important to see who ends up with the lead out of this situation.
The black market is online.
That is another nuke purchase from Philothanic. Where is he thinking that's going to go? More carbon, an interesting choice in my opinion. I don't know how well that's going to work out. Morgan is a bit light on the carbon he requires to upgrade, but carbon currently very cheap.
Right.
Not too difficult a situation for him to fix.
Carbon nukes are an interesting idea. I just wonder about the timing of them. If they come earlier in the upgrade, then maybe Morgan doesn't have all that carbon stored up, and he has all his tiles committed. He can't transition into good carbon. At this point, it's not going to hurt him too much.
The black market is open for business.
Yeah, I mean, he can very easily go ahead and push this upgrade. Carbon is a bit pricey. Philothanic could make a bit of cash off of that, but then he wouldn't be upgrading himself. The core samples for Morgan do not work out the way he would have liked, but it did open up a couple more low carbons for him. He's really not going to have an issue sustaining at least some carbon production for the rest of this game.
Core sample also not working out for his water.
Yeah. Not the way he'd have liked. Just a bit of poor luck for Morgan with those samples this game.
Let the bidding begin.
Where'd the final one drop? Was that just on additional carbon? I think it was. And an additional low. Oh boy, 4 hits on the right resource, but 4 lows. Not the situation you really were hoping for. I do want to point out that power is $3 now. These wind turbines did not go quite as Philothanic would have liked, I'd imagine. Thinking Machine's auction seems a bit hard to judge right now. 12,000 is what Morgan picks it up for. Do you think that was really about the right price, or could it have gone a little lower or higher? Seems pretty valuable with EMPs around and dynamite for the future.
Right, I think it could have gone higher. Power's not really ever going to be an issue. Both players are pretty low in debt, so it's something they could have afforded to push for a little bit more right now.
Oh, Philothanic going to be trying to make a play into water, but unfortunately he times it a bit poorly perhaps. Morgan was in the process of transitioning to reactors, but hadn't actually finished them yet, so he sees that water's going to be a little difficult and just chooses to cancel out of them and move into glass instead. Doesn't really cost him a whole lot besides a little production time at that point. More nukes come down. This time on Philothanic's water. Just everybody enjoying that particular black market tool this game.
It is interesting that we have yet to see core samples come out for Philothanic, that being one of the things we identified as him probably thinking about with this found.
Yeah, it is worth noting that not only is he adjacent to water there, but it is a significant amount of riverbed near him. Always a decent chance to hit water at that point. So those two things combined should potentially push him a little bit more toward the core sample. Water continues to get very, very expensive here, as he just doesn't have enough access to it after these nukes. Instead, going to commit to a couple glass kilns.
Also taking this second high aluminum tile makes a lot of sense. Gooning it, maybe not entirely necessary. The difference between that 2.5 and 1.5 aluminum per second isn't huge.
Black market is open for business.
No, it really isn't. The Goon I don't really know if I like at all. I mean, Morgan's already shown an interest in attacking your water. Might have been a bit more correct to choose to try and find some additional water and then protect that, rather than save this resource that long-term might not be as interesting. Although, aluminum did just spike to 163 on that upgrade from Morgan. Pirates should be pretty decent here. I'm kind of wondering if Morgan is thinking about what he wants to do to secure a little more water. He's moving into some farms. I would expect he'll want more water to go along with that, but you could go for an optimization center, you could commit to a third tile. Just interesting to see how these players are going to resolve this water situation as we move forward this game.
Virtual reality, going for 14k would be interesting. Could potentially go for more. 2 scavengers will make for a decent pleasure dome. And
yeah, it's going to be an okay pleasure dome for sure. And you're right, the power is very cheap as well. But hey, virtual reality, 14k for Morgan. He is going to be able to start using that immediately by going ahead and getting down this pleasure dome. Only 1 claim left. This is going to be likely his last claim of the game. Did save it for a moment. Trying to figure out where he put it exactly. Maybe just this carbon quarry that's coming up now.
Looks like instead of going for core samples on his nearby water, Philothanic has elected to reach way up north for this high water.
Well, that's going to cost him in fuel. Once again, fuel has continued to be an issue today for a lot of players. Philothanic actually has his reactors only covering his fuel costs, not actually pulling in any profit from those buildings whatsoever.
Has managed to catch up to level 5. He is going to more reactors. That should work out nicely for him. Only committed to 1 silicon tile so far.
Yeah. Morgan, meanwhile, has a significant cash lead, but has to be worried about the fact that that interest tick has driven him to a D bond rating. Once again, fuel being an issue for Morgan too. With these 2 reactors, he is not even covering his fuel costs. Would need a third in order to do that, pulling in no profit from these whatsoever right now. It's going to be an immediate off-world market. Interesting, given that the building does not seem all that profitable at the moment. Best launch is 25,000 in oxygen.
What he does have going for him is that he does have thinking machines, so that is something. Also easy access to oxygen with dry ice, so that price doesn't necessarily skyrocket as much as it normally would.
And on top of that, I mean, easy access to oxygen from this very high fuel price this game has generated. Pretty simple to just put down additional reactors if fuel is so expensive, which means both of the resources are going to be important to have.
What Morgan does desperately need to do is move these aluminum mines back into power, but that kills him on fuel and power.
Yeah, he was trying to make some profit off of that spike into aluminum, but that time has well and truly passed. And exactly right, that power is not being kind to him at this point in the game. Another mule auction. Game saying, water's a bit too expensive, guys. Maybe you should do something about it. I'm surprised that we didn't. Feels like could have been very helpful. Potentially teleportation to fix this fuel problem as well. I mean, we got thinking machines and virtual reality, but there are other tools that were available and potentially very powerful in this game.
Right.
Motion and stuff.
For Philothanic, also the option of financial instruments. Always nice to get that big chunk of money.
Yep. Typically, at this kind of game, we're pulling 200 that financial instruments built for it. Pretty revenue just power. So he at least is not going to be having a debt problem the way that Morgan is. And I'm quite concerned about this for Morgan because he's going to want to keep picking up Lamar actions on this. He's going to lose. He's what, 5K this game. Not access to Morgan could be in trouble. He's having to pay down a lot of the debt manually.
finally is back in wind turbines, though trying to fix
Shipment launched.
still being a little
Look at
bit.
all the money.
One advantage he does have is that Philothanic does not seem to have spotted this hologrammed offworld.
Yeah, he has made no moves that are right. And critically, Philothanic, now that he's spotted the Goon Squad, that he could pretty easily pick up a spy and check that out. Really good indicator that you should do it if you happen to run into a Goon or
Pirates.
all of them. And
Those
Philothanic can
filthy
definitely
bandits.
see that based on the current price.
Right, especially when you know your opponent has thinking machines, that should be a clear giveaway.
Also, my game froze. I don't know about you. I'm stuck at Soul 52230 right now.
I am on Soul 6 midday.
Well, all right then.
Launch affirmative. What a
Let you keep us
payout.
updated while I come to what's going on.
It's both players have now moved.
There we go. I'm catching up now.
Both players have moved into optimization centers at this point. That's a very good thing with water all the way up to $230. Maybe that's going to be enough for Philothanic to push on through with this with Morgan's large amount of debt. Just keep pushing those upgrades, keep making all this money off on-world. You don't necessarily need to go off-world. Off-worlds are not amazing.
Yeah, I was quite surprised still by that move of Morgan into Offworlds. I don't know how much it's made him thus far. Can't have been a whole lot. I mean, aluminum is currently the best launch, and that's purely because it costs $1 at the moment. Almost nothing to actually get that started shipping. Meanwhile, this optimization center should be doing some great work.
Morgan paying 40k debt for a high water tile.
Ooh. I don't think he could afford that at this stage of the game. Even with water, very valuable.
But
It
he's-
doesn't feel like the best of options.
And he's quickly pushing towards 300k of debt. His price is going to drop rapidly, and Philothanic is making a lot of money. I don't think he can delay the game long enough at this point.
Optimization
Though he does still have this
centers
very nice pleasure dome, $280 a second.
Yeah, great little pleasure dome. That's fantastic. The optimization center's online now. Could try and pull in some more water, but Philothanic's already got that streaming on in. 2 a second pretty handily. Morgan, having been locked out of the black market so effectively, was never able to continue with this idea of nuking his opponent's water out, and it just feels like the game plan has been scattered in so many different directions that it's never actually worked out and come together completely to focus on one goal to use to win the game.
Philothanic also doing a nice job of sitting on this fuel price instead of selling it down. Now Morgan's getting into fuel of his own, but might have been interesting to see Philothanic try to push harder into buying into those resources. He's doing that with food now that Morgan just transitioned out. It's a nice way to invest your cash a bit.
Certainly is. Always good to force your opponent to gain even more debt in life support. Plus, it's going to drive up that price for by the time you do actually go ahead and sell the resource down. Morgan is threatening Philothanic here. Philothanic should have cash to defend himself, does indeed get it done, but Morgan managed to delay the game just a bit by forcing those purchases.
But that 420k in debt, it's going to catch up with him pretty quickly.
Definitely is not going to be a great thing for Morgan to have to deal with. He is managing to make a pretty decent amount of money at this point, having moved into reactors himself. He's got all kinds of water streaming in, life support coming online, the electronics are decent, glass is good, and well, the off-world is still there, although not getting a whole lot done.
Likely to get
Still.
blown up in short order.
Yep. Well, although that was a water pump being blown up by Morgan. Interesting use of dynamite there. It is going to damage Philothanic's water, but I don't see it really affecting the game too terribly much. The oxygen is actually pretty expensive off-world at this point, 490 per, but the on-world price is just so high. It hasn't managed to become profitable at all yet.
And that's in part because of these glass furnaces, which really could be almost anything else, making a lot more money.
Electronics factories, pretty simply, even. I mean, there's even a shortage going on right now. Your opponent's in a little bit of it, but the colony's been consuming so many of them across the course of this game that likely would have been a better option. Well, that said, Morgan is a little closer to buying Philothanic than Philothanic is to buying Morgan. However, with this repair, I don't know if that was the best decision, although Carbon is still at $5 afterward.
And this
Who got
coming
the better end of that deal.
debt tick's gonna knock a cool 70k off of Morgan's purchase price, something like that.
Yeah, this is going to be a pretty significant debt tick. Let's just watch the stock price fall. Don't repair it, Morgan.
The engineers have
Don't do
advanced
it.
our production.
Philothanic has been struggling a little bit to pull in some cash, although I believe he just got a big shipment of electronics that really helped out. That is going to let him easily push on through. And he has the buy onto Morgan if he'd like it. As you were saying, debt just too high. After that interest tick, Philothanic cleans the game and the series up 2-0 against King Morgan.
Right, Morgan doing a very good job making money at the end there, just wasn't quite enough with those debt problems.
Yeah. I honestly think if Morgan hadn't built the off-world, if that had been an optimization center instead, we could have seen a very, very different game, but maybe just some slow transitions, not handling debt particularly well throughout the series.
Right.
Causing some problems.
Those aluminum mines in particular causing massive issues.
Absolutely. Big problem for him. All right, well. That's a pretty straightforward game in a lot of ways. Just always is when those debt ticks are what kills you at the end of the day. I'll try and look and see the balance sheet. How much Morgan was actually doing in purchasing. Yeah, sold almost no power that game. And did buy a ton of fuel. And Philothanic, despite the fact that he was doing so much shipping, he kept his debt in check by just having those reactors down all the time. Didn't rotate out of them, just made sure to leave them there, and that kept his debt okay. Even if they weren't actually pulling in much of a profit. Ended up working out for him.
Morgan also probably doing too little committing to water. He had a good position to take advantage of the water market with Philothanic having problems of his own. Only committing to the 2 water tiles for a long time, getting that third in the auction, ended up letting Philothanic make a lot more money on water.
Yeah, it definitely did. Also, wanted to look at one more thing, our black market use, and you can see that that's also a big point where Morgan fell behind. A lot of that likely due to the fact that first of all, he did have a bit of a lead for a long time, so he just wasn't as interested in being the aggressor, had a lot of core sample purchases, but also just spent so much time at that D bond rating that he wasn't able to use the black market as much as Philothanic was, and toward the end of the game, that seemed to make a very big difference. Because he just couldn't keep up with tools like his EMPs.
Definitely. His production all in this massive cluster, even with the thinking machines helping him out quite a bit. Just not a good place to be.
Nope. Not going to be good for him at all. Well, I think that does wrap this series up and the games for today. I don't know of any others that